Live. The Hangout Air is live. Let's go refresh here, get the framing, put the volume on. Hello, everybody. Okay, give me 2 seconds just to make sure that we are on and live and that the framing is good. All right. Ready, steady, go. Let's do this. Let's do this. Okay, let me make sure that everything looks good. Perfect. Putting that on pause so I can see the comments. Bringing up, wait, I don't need to bring up the chat, actually. Okay, no, it's perfect. So now I'm going to just go and bring up the screen. We're live, people. That joke is never going to get old. We're doing it live, people. We shall wait for everyone to flock in because I'm sure that this is what everyone wanted to do on a beautiful Saturday afternoon. Although I suspect we might have a strong UK delegate, so it's nighttime there, and you know, maybe this will be good Saturday night viewing, educational viewing. You will notice that I am not in my typical location, so I don't have the not legal advice thingy on the back, but let's just preface this. Always, nothing in these live streams constitutes legal advice. This is for educational, or as Homer says, edumacational purposes. And we're going to have a good one today because I've been meaning to get to these particular issues for a while, and now that I've actually read the judgment that came out in the Tommy Robinson case after I did the recap so that people could potentially digest that decision better, there's a lot to talk about. What was the thing I was going to say? Oh, the decision of the Mike Ward decision, and reading some of the comments there, it's amazing. It's amazing. We'll give everybody a few minutes to flock in here. And just to preface this, I know these are very touchy subjects, and I mean, everything in law is pretty much a touchy subject to some extent because people don't get in front of judges or things don't become legal issues because it's all roses and rainbows type thing. I put the discussion mode or the comments on 5-second slow mode, which is basically no slow mode at all, just to avoid outright spamming. But if I may ask, like as a personal courtesy, keep the discussion civil. Oftentimes, you know, this discussion degrades into lacking civility, not because of the substance of what is being said, but because the manner in which it is being said. Okay, can everyone just tell me that the audio is good enough and the lighting is good enough with a quick Y right now, and I'll just look to make sure. No, and Nathan says civil, yes, civil here. We've been very fortunate. I think the comment section has tended to remain very civil, and I like it. And it's, you know, this is not a sort of an opinionated political channel. Wow, that was a lot of Y's that just came in. Okay, good. This is not a political channel where I give you my opinion and my spin on things and my opinionated, sassy interpretation of things. There are tons of channels out there for that. And trust me, I have my opinion and it probably seeps through in some cases. And I'm not shy to give it in other cases. But really the purpose is, let's sort of understand the facts, let's understand the law, and you can all come to your own decisions, and you can go to the Young Turks or the Amazing Lucases or the, who's another one that I just started watching? Well, not started, Sticks Hexenhammer 666, I've been watching forever, but there's a ton of guys who give good opinions on these matters. I watch and I listen and I absorb, but that's not what I want to be doing. Audio is great. Glare on your glasses is a meh. You want to see a meh? How about me without my glasses? Yeah. Can I talk about non-competes, Shawja? I could do non-competes in a future law, because in a future vlog, non-competes in employment contracts are very interesting, and non-competes in sort of commercial contracts are also very, very interesting. Tim Pool, that's the one I was thinking of. I recently discovered Tim Pool, like say within the last 6 months, maybe less actually. And yeah, that's how I balance out who I listen to on one side and the other. We're at 122 watching now, slowly going up. You look more aggressive without the glasses. Yeah, my facial features become much more exaggerated without my glasses. So the Mike Ward decision, we'll start with that because there were so many comments on that. The Mike Ward decision is the stand-up comic who was fined, or as I like to say, found, that's a joke, $42,000 for a bit that he did making fun of a teenager with certain developmental disabilities, mentally all there, but what was it called? It was called churning disease. But he made fun of a kid, and not halfway there, and was taken to the Human Rights Tribunal after the kid and his mother and father filed a complaint. I did a vlog on that, and anybody who doesn't know, I'll just do like a 5-minute summary, maybe even less, while people are coming in. If anyone has questions, ask them, and I'll do my best to get to them, and then I'll run a Q&A section where you can rerun those questions. Okay, so Mike Ward is a stand-up comic. He did a bit which he did live in front of a crowd over an extended period of time, and then he did it for his YouTube channel, and he kept the bit up on his channel for about a year. He had a bit called The Untouchables, or in French, Les Intouchables? Was it Les Intouchables in French? Whatever, it was Untouchables, or The Sacred Cows. The things, people you can't make fun of in Quebec because it's just so politically incorrect to make fun of them. One of them was Celine Dion, because she's a national treasure, and the other one was this kid, Jérémy Gabriel, who suffers from a condition and tried to make a career in singing. And apparently, this, by all accounts, the singing was, not the greatest singing in the world. And Mike Ward made some jokes about how the singing was bad, how the kid looked funny, and he did a bunch of things and put it up on his YouTube channel, and it stayed up for a while. And then what ended up happening is kids in Jérémy's school saw the bit, started making fun of Jérémy. It became a whole source of stress and everything. And then the family filed a complaint with what we call the Quebec Human Rights Tribunal, which is, some people call it an administrative tribunal. They call it a specialty tribunal, and it specializes in the Quebec Charter of Human Rights. And for those of you who don't know what the Quebec Charter of Human Rights is, it's a specific law, a quasi-constitutional law that guarantees freedoms and rights and liberties for individuals as they relate to inter-citizen relationships. And the Quebec Charter itself is sort of like the Constitution to some extent. It guarantees the right to freedom, peaceable freedom of religion, freedom of expression, non-search and seizure, fair trial, all sorts of things. It's a specific law, and it sets up a specific commission that hears matters involving provisions of the Quebec Charter. People can take issues of the Quebec Charter provisions before the regular courts, or they can take it before the Commission des droits de la personne, which is the Human Rights Tribunal. The benefit by taking it before the Human Rights Tribunal is the Commission does an inquiry, and if they decide there's been a violation, they will carry on the complaint for the plaintiff or the complainant at the Commission's expense, at the government's expense to some extent. So it's sort of free for the plaintiff if the Commission decides that they have a legitimate cause of action. And they are notoriously plaintiff-friendly because it's sort of like the rental board, which is notoriously tenant-friendly because it's set up to protect the tenants, because historically the tenants have been, exploited or abused or subject to the discretions of the landlords. If the commission doesn't decide to take up the case, they can take it up themselves before the commission at their own expense, or they can take it up before the regular courts at their own expense. Now, and the Commission came down hard on Mike Ward and ordered him to pay compensatory and punitive damages to Jérémy Gabriel for the jokes, to his mother for certain jokes that he made at the expense of the mother relating to the kid's handicap. And I'm going to get into the comments that I read afterwards, but right now I have to go back, and I saw a super chat from Mike Lombardo says, would you be willing to cover the Vic Mignogna depositions? I'd really love to hear your thoughts, sir. Awesome channel, just to say thank you very much. So I'm not as into Vic Mignogna I hope I'm saying that right, as Nick Recchietta, who, from what I've been seeing, has been covering it like daily. I can do it. I mean, I can do it. From what I've seen, it's a pretty heated discussion on social media. I started looking into it, but I can do it. It seems very interesting. It brings up the issue of this trial by public opinion before any judicial proceedings have been taken or confirmed guilt, and it's a sign of the times. But so the short answer is maybe. Okay, so back to the Commission. They order Mike Ward to pay for Jérémy on the basis of a protected grounds of discrimination, that being handicap, which is provided for in the Charter. They also ordered to pay damages to the mother because of jokes he made that his mother was more interested in buying a fancy car than treating her son's condition, was mockery that was based on Jérémy's handicap and therefore covered by the Charter. And people in the comment section, because I've looked at my demographics recently, and there's a lot of Americans, and were sort of astounded that we even have a human rights tribunal. And they sort of regarded this tribunal as something out of a 1984 esque George Orwellian sort of tribunal, where you have these administrative government officials who are now basically on government funds sanctioning civilians for inter-civilian conduct. And I've got to tell you, like, reading the comments, it's very interesting, because I grew up with all of this. I grew up with it before I even knew it existed, and I studied law and just took for granted that we had these things. Like, you never ask the question when you're sort of brought up in that environment. And then in reflecting on it, it is very interesting, because the question I was asking myself, having seen these questions, is when people say, like, why do you have a law that protects some people? Isn't that exactly like out of 1984? Like, all animals are born equal, but, or what is it? All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. And why would you have this charter that creates protected groups and creates special classes of protections, or special classes that lead to more severe sanctions under criminal condemnations? Why would you even have that? Why do you need to have that? And it's interesting, because you were brought up in this milieu, and I never even asked myself the question. And it did get me thinking, like, we have laws and we already have courts that protect human rights, all human rights. Looking at it from that perspective, I can see how it's sort of a foreign thing to have these administrative tribunals and these court judges and these commissions, like government entities that carry out inquiries for what is effectively called, say, defamation among civilians or citizens. And why do you need it? And look, at some point, I can sort of understand it, but it is at some point the law as well. And people were criticizing me for, like, no, Canada has no freedom of speech when a comedian can't make fun of a kid. And no, Canada has no freedom of speech when you have government-funded entities carrying on inquiries and investigations into civilians, and then issuing fines where, if someone doesn't pay the fine, what happens? It's a monetary fine, but if someone doesn't pay the fine, in theory, they can go to jail for a joke. And those are all, this is all legitimate concerns. The only reflex that I have is that these tribunals and this commission and the Quebec Charter of Human Rights basically codifies or specifies laws that already exist. And let me read the provision of the charter that got a lot of comments, where they said, human dignity and respect are earned, they're not real rights. Freedom of expression is the only real right. This was a comment I got from a lot of people. Freedom of expression is the only real rights, and all of these other rights are made up. What is freedom of, what is dignity, what is respect, what is honor? No one is entitled to that as a right. That has to be earned. And perhaps to some extent, it was, I didn't explain, well, I think I read the provision, so it's not really tough to, I can see how that misconception is born or developed. But the section 4 of the Quebec Charter reads as follows. It says, every person has a right to the safeguard of his dignity, honor, or reputation. And so reading it like that, it's not saying that citizens have to respect and honor and treat others with dignity. What it says is that everyone has the right to the safeguard of those protections. And when someone violates those rights, then it becomes a sanctionable offense. And it does not create the obligation to respect on any citizen. It just protects someone from an undue violation or breach of that by another. And if they do violate someone's reputation, honor, or dignity, then it becomes a sanctionable offense. And read like that, it's not much different than defamation laws, which exist in the US in any case. So it's a framing thing. But then, the question always is, if you already have laws that protect it and you already have tribunals and courts to go to, what do you need another law for? And what do you need these specialized tribunals, which end up looking like bureaucratic government tribunals that sometimes run amok? And that's a legitimate concern. But as I always say in the videos also, I'm not here to agree or disagree with the law. That's what we vote for. I was just illustrating and explaining it because a lot of Americans and a lot of other people were not fully aware of the details of that Mike Ward decision. And now that I see it, we're not even aware that we have this Quebec Human Rights Tribunals that govern the provisions of the Charter of Human Rights, the Quebec Charter of Human Rights. That was one issue, one thing that came up a lot in the section, in the comment section. Dignity, honor, and reputation, and what's the other one? Dignity and honor, and reputation. They're not fundamental rights; they're earned. True, And but the charter does not force people to respect others. It just prevents people from breaching others and abusing others. And that's what happened, in the case of Mike Ward with this kid. And then, like I say, again, not much different than standard defamation laws or harassment laws or all sorts of other things. It just maybe is being put in front of a tribunal that tends to be much more plaintiff friendly and issue these decisions, which can get excessively more and more onerous on defendants and free speech. And that's a real concern. Okay, what was the other thing that someone said? They said that a lot of the comments also were pointing to the fact that, asking me what happened to the kids who were harassing and bullying Jeremy. Did they get punished? Because people were saying it's one thing for the comedian to make the jokes, but the kids doing the actual bullying are the ones who should get punished. And that it's a legitimate point to some extent, but it misses one point. First of all, the court didn't say that Mike Ward, the comedian, was responsible for the bullying of the classmates. What he said was that Mike Ward's jokes constituted harassment, and part of the damages was what naturally or ultimately followed from Mike Ward's jokes, which was the stress and anguish that it caused at school from people repeating the jokes. But the fact that the kids didn't get punished also doesn't mean that Mike Ward didn't do something wrong. If you're inclined to believe that they both did something wrong, the fact that one gets off or doesn't get punished doesn't mean that the other one should as well. And incidentally, we're going to touch on this when we talk about Tommy Robinson, because a lot of the comments in the Tommy Robinson did nothing more than a lot of the other mainstream media. So if he gets nailed with contempt, so should the other outlets. We'll get there. And we're going to get to Tommy Robinson sooner than later once we cover the Mike Ward. So the fact that the kids in the high school didn't get punished or whatever, where were the parents? I agree that's a problem and a weakness and a deficiency in the schooling and in the parenting and in teaching kids not to make fun of other kids just because a comedian makes a joke. Okay, people, tell me if I'm talking too fast now. I haven't been reading the comments, so I hope I'm talking slowly enough. But the fact that the kids may have done something wrong also but didn't get punished doesn't mean that, to the extent that Mike Ward did do something wrong, if you are inclined to believe that, he should not get punished. It's not like everybody gets punished for doing the same wrong thing or nobody does. It's, sometimes the hammer hits one nail because it sticks up higher. And we're going to talk about that with Tommy Robinson. And other people were saying that the kid is a public figure. That was it. Consent. People were objecting to this notion that the tribunal said that, Jeremy never consented to being mocked by Mike Ward, the same way another stand-up comedian with a disability consented to Mike Ward making fun of him. And that's an interesting thing, because that came up in my mind as well. The idea that you need to consent to being mocked. But the very, very fine nuance on that was that they were talking about being mocked on a protected grounds of handicap or disability, where one comic gave that right and the other, and Jeremy did not. Jeremy, being a public figure, may be grounds for ridicule and humor and critique, but apparently never consented to being mocked on the basis of a protected right of being of handicap. And I can understand how people are inclined to place no weight in that concept. And I mean, I can understand it as well. It's especially, maybe it's not his fault. Maybe it's his parents' fault for putting him in the limelight or for allowing him to chase that dream, knowing that the world is not always a nice place and doesn't always say nice things. And they are going to say bad things about you for right or for wrong. And as mean as it is, it's going to happen. It's what happens. You put up, people online make fun of people online. That's just the nature of it. And so some people are saying, look, the kid's a public figure. He made himself a public figure on his career. If he didn't, his mother did. And so as a result, certainly the mother has no right to claim damages for the mockery that ensues in the online world for having made her kid a celebrity. And if the kid has a gripe, maybe it should be against the mother. And, and I can understand that as well. I could have understood the tribunal saying, Jeremy has been wrong, but the parents should have anticipated what would be the public reaction by placing her kid in the limelight. And as cruel as the world is, he got a ton of support, but he's going to get people like Mike Ward who are going to make fun of him. So these are all understandable reactions, and they're even defensible positions in law. I mean, I could see someone raising that argument. I could see the attorney saying, "Kid's a public figure. He's a public figure that has been defined as a public figure based on who he is. And in that sense, you can't possibly prevent ridicule on that same basis without infringing on the freedom of expression and without deviating from the standard that public figures they are subjected to a higher standard and a higher burden of ridicule than private individuals. We'll see what the Court of Appeal says. The Court of Appeal has yet to render their judgments, and I was sort of hoping, like by cosmic thing, they would have issued their judgment last night, but they didn't. So we'll see what happens, because this was a decision of the Human Rights Tribunal. It has not yet it has not yet been confirmed. It hasn't been reversed by the Court of Appeal, but they're looking at it. So we'll see where it goes. Okay, now I did miss something that I can't miss, and that was Keith Wagner. Thank you very much for that super chat. Now let's read this here. Couldn't this judgment be seen as a punitive damage against being able to think? If in order to think you have to risk being offensive, couldn't this prevent the ability of free creative thought? How far would be too far? And I truly love your work. Thank you very much, Keith Wagner, and thank you for that super chat. That's amazing. Okay, and this is the real. And I spoke with a lawyer, but I don't act like a reporter, and I don't talk about my discussions that I have with people, and certainly without their consent. And I didn't ask him for permission to relay the contents of our discussion. What I said, and what is a real concern, is when does a politician, and someone actually made this comment in the comment section. They said, when does a politician with a lisp use this? And I say this because people tend to think I have a lisp also. When does a politician with a lisp use this to sanction a critique who makes fun of him while he's running for office? And then, does the absolute reductio be that, okay, you can make fun of the politician, but only for political purposes, and anything relating to other attributes become potentially sanctionable under the Quebec human rights, under the Quebec Charter by this commission? And then even more so, does it basically prevent caricatures of politicians? Does it prevent making fun of features of politicians? Does it prevent critique, and does it lead to basically placing certain people beyond critique at the risk of effectively government imposed fines? It's a real risk. We'll see how far it goes. I mean, and this is sort of like the Jordan B. Peterson concern about the state of the laws and the not the lax, but rather the ambiguous or the potentially abusable direction that this can go. But this potential abuse of all laws exists regardless, and we'll get into this with the Tommy Robinson contempt. Like it's obviously the more ambiguous a law, the more potentially abused it can be. But then the courts, in theory, are supposed to come in and say this law is unconstitutionally ambiguous. Redraft, strike it, and if you want to draft it with more precision, do so, like the Supreme Court did in Fucht with the Lanham Act. But it's a risk. There's no question it's a risk. And how far does it go? And what does it do for stand-up comedy in Quebec? It's not even a joke. What does it do for stand-up comedy in Quebec? And then taking it one step further, what does it do for someone who's watching in Quebec stand-up comedy? I know Lisa Lampanelli's not doing it anymore, but what does it do? What happens if in Quebec I'm watching something of Lisa Lampanelli doing something in the States, which is totally fine in the States, but could be a violation in Quebec? It's disconcerting. That being said, there is a limit, even being a public figure, to the type of harassment and ridicule that any person should have to experience. And then the question is, in Mike Ward and Jeremy Gabriel, did they breach that line? And that's where opinions are opinions, but knowing the law is what's truly important. And we'll see. I mean, I can understand both sides. I certainly know which side I'm more inclined to go with. And I said it, and I'll say it every time. Imperfect freedom of speech is better than perfect censorship. It's just the way it is, because what ends up happening is the bar keeps getting raised higher and higher, and then lo and behold, it's not even a question of what you do say that's overtly harassing. It's a question of what you don't say that can be implied harassing. But we'll get there when we get there, and we'll deal with one decision at a time. Okay, that was Mike Ward. I don't think I've left anything out in that, but for the fact that the Court of Appeal will render its decision, and I will cover it. And we'll see if it gets to the Supreme Court. I know the lawyer. Oddly enough, I've had a few files with him and or his firm, in the past. So I'll email him the second it comes out. We'll see if we do something of a. I'm not sure how he feels about social media and these types of interviews. I think he'd be game for it, but we'll see what I can get. Okay, before we, what time is it? How long? That was good. I don't want to go too long on the Mike Ward. I think it's a little. Hey, I just wanted to address those questions. Now let's see if does anyone have any questions about the Mike Ward or Quebec before we move on to the big one, the Tommy Robinson. Yeah, this is 3 Steps Sideways says there's a comedian in the UK called Alistair Williams who can't get work at all now because he called out the hypocrisy underlying the hypocrisy. Well, this is the other thing. There used to be a day and age where if you didn't like something, you would turn off the TV or switch the channel. And the problem seems to be now that television, and there's no such thing as switching off the switch because social media is everywhere and it's pervasive and it's impossible to get away from it. That being said, my kid has a YouTube channel. I said, when you put up a video on YouTube, just look at yourself in the mirror, pick out everything you don't like about yourself or everything you think you don't like about yourself, amplify it by 10. Someone's going to say it. Are you ready for that to happen? And I say to myself, like, are you ready for that to happen? Because that's the unfortunate nature and you have to deal with that. But where's the line? That's why we have the courts, and then hopefully the courts get it right, but we'll see. Okay. Shall we move on to Tommy Robinson by Wise in the comment section? Let's see how fast this. Count Dankula is another decent example of something that Count Dankula, the guy with the pug, where it's you could see where it goes, and then as offensive and disgusting and as horrible a joke as it is, and even if it's not a joke, let's just say he wanted to be offensive by doing it. I mean, geez, at some point we have to treat words as words, and like I say in my comment sections, I don't edit comments, I don't delete comments, I take the insults with the compliments. To the extent that nobody's threatening violence, that's my threshold, and I think it's a healthy debate because people say stupid things and other people call them out on it. Nothing lends legitimacy to what might otherwise be stupid things, then censoring them and then taking them off and saying you can't say them. They're so stupid, you can't say them. Okay, that's as much as my opinion as we're going to do. Tommy Robinson. Okay, so the video I did, which I published deliberately before the judgment came out because I didn't want. It was sort of as a prepper so that people could read the decision and hopefully digest it, because there's a lot of not misinformation. There's a lot of information on it, and there are a lot of nuances, and that are not just, I'm going to call them geographic nuances, but they're not nuances in information. They're nuances that have legal implications. Carla said, Viva once said, yeah. 3 Steps Sideways, thank you very much. Okay, so there's a lot of information, details that are important, and then there's a point at which the details become splitting hairs, just so that someone can try to say, I know more than you, when it doesn't actually have a material impact on the decision. So a lot of comments, and I don't know if people comment in the videos before they get through the whole video, so they don't know that I'm going to get to a point later on, or they skip certain sections and then don't get the beginning. Tommy Robinson, for everybody who doesn't know, and I think everybody everybody here at least knows the details, but anybody watching this afterwards, remind me to timestamp. It's at about 30 minutes in, we're talking about Tommy Robinson. Tommy Robinson, there were 2 separate incidents of, I will call them alleged contempt, that gave rise to this entire thing. One of them was in 2017, which was in a different criminal trial, where Tommy Robinson was found in contempt and given a suspended sentence. In that was May 2017. I might be wrong on the month, but it was 2017. That particular contempt resulted from Tommy Robinson filming. If it wasn't in the courthouse, but not in a courtroom, it was on the courthouse premises. And now the reason why I'm making this distinction is that it's different than the second time in 2018, where he was not on court premises or in the courthouse. He was on public ground. And so a lot of people were saying, get your facts straight. He was never on court ground. In 2017, unless I'm grossly mistaken, he was either in the courthouse but not in the courtroom, or on the court property but not in the courtroom. And the reason why that's relevant is that, for anybody who doesn't know, you're not there are certain sections of a courthouse where you're not allowed recording. You're in the courthouse, it's fine. You're not in a courtroom, but there are sections that are dictated or dedicated or cordoned off for video recording, and that is to maintain decorum, and that is to ensure that people are not running around with cameras, getting people right as they leave the courtroom or getting people as they get out of the elevator. You have literally greened off, cordoned off sections, at least in Quebec and I suspect everywhere, specific places where cameras are meant to be set up and where people can get their shots and their interviews. That's in the courthouse. Filming in the courtroom, people can let me know in the comment section. I don't know of any place where that's legal unless it's like the government or unless it's like an official recording. You want to see how fast you're going to get hauled out of a courtroom, flip out your cell phone and start recording in a courtroom. It doesn't happen. So the first contempt is relevant because he was recording on court property, but not in the courtroom. And if it's on the courthouse, but not in the courthouse, it's that legally comes to the same. It's on court property, but not in a courtroom, and presumably where he was not allowed to be recording, but also in the context of a lawsuit where there was, what do they call them? The RROs, the Restricted Reporting Order, or the Reporting Restriction Order. And this is where we're going to get into the real issue, is to, publication bans and how they're used in the UK, the frequency with which they're used in the UK versus Canada versus the US. We'll get there, and if I forget, remind me, but I won't forget. So the first contempt, there was a publication ban, an RRO, on the criminal trial. Tommy Robinson apparently filmed on the courthouse, but not in the courtroom, so like a less egregious, in violation of the non-publication ban, and possibly, I'm not sure, but possibly in violation of where you're allowed to record in the courthouse anyhow. Given a 3-month suspended sentence, fine. A year later, in another criminal trial, which we all know very well. I mean, we know what was going on in that trial. There was another publication ban, another RRO under Section 4.2 of the Contempt of Court Act of 1981. And what's amazing is I actually, was all sort of a learning curve for me, because I knew these laws existed, but not in the detail that they exist. There was another reporting restriction order, or restricted reporting order, issued in that criminal trial. Tommy Robinson was live streaming Facebook in May of 2018, I believe, on public ground. Nobody denies that. And in the Facebook Live, he mentioned certain things which were, by all accounts, in the public domain. Other broadcasters or other news agencies had already reported it. And this is where we have to qualify things, not neutrally to feign neutrality, but in a way that does not go one way or the other, where we can qualify the interaction that Tommy Robinson had with the defendants, and you can qualify whichever way you want, depending on how you feel. But one thing is clear, is that there was an interaction with the defendants as they were entering the courthouse in that live stream. And this is a legally, materially relevant fact, because it's above and beyond what content of the live stream was already part of the public domain. And then we all know what happened in May of 2018, arrested for causing a public disorder or a breach of the peace or something, then taken into court, charged with contempt, had the trial, found guilty and sentenced within, someone said 2 hours, I thought it was 5, the same day. I mean, and I said this in the first video and in the second video, there's only a handful of countries where anybody can be sentenced to 13 months in jail by being arrested, tried, convicted, and sentenced in the same day without having the recourse to their attorney of choice. It's not, I mean, to say it's a procedural irregularity or a procedural injustice is an understatement of epic proportions. And the court, in reversing it, agreed as much. But so that's what happened. So he was found in contempt a second time, given a 10 months plus the 3-month suspended sentence for breaching the RRO. And there was an appeal of the decision. It was reversed on the procedural impropriety, the procedural irregularity. He was retried and resentenced. And this is where it all gets very, very relevant in the decision. And if anybody hasn't read the decision, go read it, because and any lawyer is going to know there are some days when you are representing somebody, or you're in front of a judge, and the judgment is written before the hearing got started, and there's nothing that that lawyer is going to be able to say to change the mind of the judge who has already taken cognizance of the file and has already knows where they're going already. I mean, any lawyer can tell you this happens. Sometimes you're on the receiving end of it, and sometimes you're on the benefiting end, and sometimes you're on the receiving end. And I've been on both, and it's not fun when it happens because you feel that it's happening when you're at court. Anybody who reads that judgment is going to know that there was nothing Furlong, who's Tommy Robinson's lawyer, could have argued that would have convinced the court. Nothing. And it's not to say that the court's decision is outlandishly untenable in law. The court's decision is well drafted, it's well researched, and it's a justifiable decision in law. On the contempt, where I think it's not necessarily justifiable, is on the sanction, on the duration of the sentencing. But that's neither here nor there. But the court reversed the first decision and then heard a retrial on the contempt. Why? So now, okay, one question I have to ask. I don't know why he was not in front of a jury. My understanding, I don't know why this contempt was not held in front of a jury versus a judge. I don't know if he selected it. I don't know if the type of contempt was one that only goes in front of a judge. You need someone who knows UK procedure better than me to answer. Okay, so we're going to get to a number of the questions. Now, the number one thing people were saying is that there was no publication of the RRO in the Tommy Robinson, in the second contempt. And I think Talsap will tell me if that's the question here. It says, Viva Frei, there was no publication order on Tommy's trial, as well as the press ganged up on him, and the court doesn't care why. Okay, sorry, that's not the same question, but sorry, where was I? The publication ban. So a lot of people were saying that there was the court didn't post the publication ban in court. And therefore, and Tommy had inquired as to whether or not there was the ban the morning of the Facebook Live, and a court reporter said he wasn't sure. Go look at it, look into it yourself. So here's the thing: the court addresses that, and the court basically says, we believe that Tommy knew that there was a ban in effect. We believe that he knew. We heard the evidence. We heard the witnesses. We believe he knew, and that's where. I always say in law, you have one side, you have the truth of one party, there's the truth of the other, and the truth is somewhere in the middle. But then you get to the legal truth at the end of the day, barring an appeal which changes that legal truth. You have the court saying, we've heard the evidence, we've heard what he said, we believe that he knew that the order was in place. And even if the court reporter didn't know and didn't assist him fully, it was not the court reporter's obligation to do so. It is the reporter's obligation to do so. And their reasoning is that if this is not the burden, if the burden is not strictly and objectively on the person doing the publication, this defense will be used all the time. You ask a clerk who doesn't know anything, and then they say, I don't know, and then people ban the RROs all the time. And the other thing that the court said was that it was published online, so it was findable and ought to have been found and ought to have been known by anybody who wanted to take that chance. So, I mean, the Court of Appeal, it's not that they disregard it. They say, okay, we heard you. We heard that the court didn't tell you. It wasn't posted on the billboard behind, but it was online for anybody to find. The court reporter may have not known the answer, but they told you to look into it. And in any case, we believe that you knew because you said as much in the Facebook live stream. What can anyone say to that? I mean, this is not a case of not being allowed to adduce evidence. This is a case where the court says, okay, I've heard the evidence, and this is what we come to as our opinion, because the only opinion that matters in law is the opinion of the judge. The more fundamental question before we go on to the other issues is the ease with which, or the frequency with which, UK courts issue these publication bans or these RROs. In Canada, the Supreme Court declared that the publication bans, there was a Supreme Court decision about a broadcast that was going to go on about an ongoing trial of national or notoriety. And the court concluded that it's a violation of freedom of the press to not allow publication under the guise of publication bans. There are certain exceptions, and there's certain cases where you can do it to protect the names of witnesses or victims, etc. But by and large, you can't do it because freedom, open courts are a cornerstone of a free and democratic society. And the states have taken it one notch further in terms of freedom of the press, not issuing these publication bans, which from what I see in the comment section, Americans find absolutely mind-boggling. They find it atrocious. They find it contrary to a free democratic society to issue these publication bans on trials so that the freedom of the press is absolutely paralyzed. Oh, and I forgot to mention one other thing about the procedural irregularity is that there was a publication ban on Tommy Robinson's contempt in the first case. There can be nobody who is on Tommy's side that would obviously agree with that. Nobody who hates Tommy should agree that this should happen in a free democratic society, certainly one with rules of habeas corpus. It's inconceivable that someone could have been sentenced to that much time in prison the same day they were arrested, tried, and convicted. It's inconceivable. And I had another thought that I forgot. Okay, whatever. But so the frequency with which these publication bans or these RROs seem to be occurring is itself concerning, and that's where I think the major issue is, because I think in law, when we agree on the basic facts that there was an RRO, there was a publication ban in effect for the second trial. From the live stream, I think people can agree that Tommy Robinson probably knew that there was a publication ban and did some verifications, but that defense was not held by the court because they said in any event they maybe chalked it up to recklessness, say like, oh, you took your chances. Okay, fine. So there was he was live streaming, and one of the other defenses that his lawyer raised was he only said things which were already in the public record, and the court got around this as well. There was I saw a video. I'm almost reluctant to say on which channel because I don't know what else is on the channel. I'm not promoting the channel or condoning it. If there's anything bad on that channel, I have no idea. I saw one analysis by someone named Politico, who was saying that the court erred in law because they added a condition to the publication ban where you can't ban publication of things that are already in the public domain. And what the court did is they said, okay, some of the things that Tommy Robinson said were already in the public domain. But what did they say? They said that you can't, but that the publication ban doesn't apply to things in the public domain that do not purport or in fact report on the trial itself. And so what the court did to get around it is they said, okay, look, it's one thing for information to be in the public domain, but we're not even convinced that prohibiting rebroadcast or prohibiting a publication of that itself does not violate the publication ban or the RRO, because it basically says you can't report on it. If it's in the public domain, that's fine. But by reporting on it, even if all you're doing is reiterating what's in the public domain, that itself can be sanctionable because it is nonetheless a report, which is prohibited, even though the content of that report is material which can be found in the public domain. And they got around it in another sense as well. Well, they said that's how they got around it. They said it was the reporting in and of itself was the breach, even though some of the content was admittedly in the public domain. And they said some of the content, because some of the other content, was not in the public domain. And I think we can agree with that. And that's just to the extent that the defendants are going in and out of the courthouse. So let's agree on the basic facts. I think we can. Let's agree on the basic fact that some of what Tommy Robinson said was already in the public domain. We can agree with that. He was filming from a public space. We can agree with that. He interacted with the defendants going into the courthouse, and I'm not going to qualify what he said, but the court goes into great detail in terms of what that interaction was to justify the decision. So I think most people could, in law, or like most legal theorists can agree that in law, the elements of contempt, it wouldn't be outlandish to say that they're met. How you go from there to justifying 9 months in prison as a sanction is where I think a lot of people should have a problem, because the first time around, the reason or the legal justification for why they proceeded with the rapidity and severity that they did was they didn't want to prejudice the ongoing trial. Fine. So they locked him up for 13 months to prevent him from interfering with the trial that apparently the defendants had already been found guilty but just had not been sentenced yet. I don't think it takes 13 months to sentence. So even if that were the rationale, I don't think it holds weight in law, but that was the rationale the first time around. The second time around, to sanction Tommy Robinson when the trial is over and done, you have to ask yourself if this 9 months is is a condemnation of the contempt or is a condemnation of the individual? I mean, it's a question. I mean, this is where opinions are going to come in. Some people are going to say it was an egregious violation of the RRO. It could have compromised and blown the entire trial, which cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxpayers' money. The witnesses don't want to come forward and re-testify in a new trial. It could have blown the whole thing out of the water. And that's sort of what the court did to justify the severity of the sanction. That's what the media did to justify the severity of the alleged contempt. Others are going to say the trial was over. They had only to be sentenced, sequester the jury from the world and not the world from the jury, as far as the sentencing goes. Okay, and if it was contemptuous, the penalty should fit the crime. A lot of people are going to say the 9 months. Although, and now in fairness as well, it was reduced to 66 days, according to a few outlets, because the 9 months takes off the 4 months already served, and there's some calculations about served time counting for more. I don't know how it worked. All I know is that from some reports that I've read, the bottom line sentence is 66 days in jail. Some people are going to say that's still excessive. The last time someone was sentenced to jail for breaching an RRO was during World War II. These are the opinions. You can come to your own opinions now that you know the facts, and we just have to agree on these facts that, yes, Tommy Robinson was reporting some stuff which was in the public domain already, and the court said, sorry, it's not because it's in the public domain that the report, a prohibited report, even if it reiterates that, is not itself a violation of the ban. And apparently in Politico's analysis also, there are these guidelines as to how sections 4.2 of the Contempt Act are to be interpreted. And the guidelines say that it can't prohibit, the ban, cannot cover anything already in the public domain. And the court gets around this by saying it can't ban anything that's in the public domain to the extent that it does not purport or in fact constitute a publication of the hearing. And Politico says, well, the court has added conditions to the guidelines of interpreting section 4.2 of the Contempt Act. Now, this is an important distinction, is I don't know what the weight of these guidelines are. It's the guidelines for interpretation of section 4.2. I don't know what the legal weight of these things are. Now, lawyers and jurists, understand that there are levels of authority, and there's authority, there's jurisprudence, there's doctrine, and there's people who give interpretations, and there's people who give advice. This is how laws are to be interpreted, etc. Those don't necessarily hold the weight of law, and they don't necessarily hold the force of, let's just say, a clear principle set up by the Supreme Court that the lower courts have to accept. I don't know what the weight of the guidelines are. I don't know if they're just recommendations, if they're guidelines that are not legally binding. It'll be, if this decision goes to appeal, it'll be for a higher court to decide whether or not the court's interpretation of how these guidelines are to be read is in fact legally tenable. But that's it. I mean, that's where we're at. Now, I didn't get to one super chat. Morton ER Crazy. I don't even know what currency is that. DKK. Super chat of support. No, thank you. People often comment before finishing the video. The majority of the comments, I don't know what that means. It annoys many creators. Well, anyways, that's it. It's so it's not that the court. This thing can't be summed up on and disregarded on one fact. Oh, what he said was in the public domain, therefore there can be no contempt. It's not that simple. And it oversimplifies it to the point of a juridical inaccuracy to say that all he did was report something that was in the public domain, because there was more to that, and the court found that there was more to that. It's also different to say he was on public property, because he was on public property. That doesn't necessarily mean that it was not a breach of the RRO. There was an interaction with the defendants, and whether or not it constitutes what the court came to in their findings in terms of stress and anxiety and all this stuff, the court goes over these things as to why these rules are in place in the first place. You don't want to deter, scare, or de-incentivize or scare people away from actually showing up to court when they have hearings, or witnesses, or because it doesn't always apply to defendants. It sometimes applies to witnesses. It sometimes applies to victims. It sometimes applies to magistrates. These rules are not only in for what were the defendants in this particular situation. So there is a logical and there's a legal basis for these rules. And the bottom line is, it is the law. The question now is, why is this law only applying apparently to Tommy Robinson and so severely? There you get into the room for controversy, because So let me just read this. Tommy, another thing is that Tommy said that he went through training if the legal guidelines, and when he explained them to the court, the opposition said that the guidelines are wrong. Well, the guidelines are guidelines. I don't know what they are. They're issued by a government body as to how the rules are to be read. I don't know that they have the force of law and what the legal standing of those guidelines are. I can only imagine that they might be something akin to rules of interpretation that we have in Quebec, which are not legally binding. They are recommendations. Danish krone. Okay, thank you for whoever told me what a DKK was. So this is the issue. I mean, the issue is that you have this law in the UK, Section 4.2, which can be a publication ban on court hearings if there is a real risk that it will prejudice the administration of justice, if it will compromise an individual's right to a fair trial. The questions that I ask myself on a personal basis are, what's the frequency with which these bans are being used? Are they being handed out like candy to the point where in the UK now, public trials are now the exception and not the rule, and not the essential rule of a free society? There was a great line in a movie called City of God, which I've always remembered. And they said the first time is the rule, the second time is the exception to the rule, and the third time the exception becomes the rule. Remember that, because it's obviously condensed onto a three-prong approach because it's easier to remember. But at some point, when the courts get a little too sensitized and the population at large to issuing these publication bans during trials, you lose a cornerstone of a democratic society, which are open trials, free and open trials. And there are reasons to prohibit certain information from being released. But if trials are no longer being conducted in public, then you have I don't want to say, you know where it goes. You have these hearings in private that nobody can report on, where people are sentenced to 10 years hard time. And I'm talking about Otto Warmbier in this particular case. And then you have the issue as to whether or not this is something personal to Tommy Robinson and other people get away with it. Or had it been someone else, they might have gotten away with a slap on the wrist or a fine instead of imprisonment. These are matters of opinion and these are matters of perspective, and I can totally understand one way or the other. And I do think in some very meaningful sense, there was an individual on trial as much as there was conduct on trial. And I read this decision. It's clear that the court did not like Tommy Robinson. It's clear that it's clear the way they were going to go, and they were going to justify their decision to go that way. And I've had these decisions myself where, for whatever the reason, the judge didn't like my client, and no matter what I said, the judge was going to find a way to get around it. And the lawyer raised all the arguments. He raised all the arguments that, he raised all of them, and the judge said, "Okay, well, we don't believe you. We disregard that, and this is untenable, and that's it." Let me think if I forgot anything in the Tommy Robinson. It's definitely not a black and white case on the contempt itself. It's not black, and very, very rarely are things black and white. But the issues that this raises, and I think Tommy Robinson wants to raise these issues, are these publication bans, the fact that there's something of a blackout, and there's something of he's bringing up issues. The question now is, is this sanction that he got exaggerated because of who he is? People are going to have their opinions on that. Deuce Go Tech LX says, "Do you think Tommy got himself arrested on purpose to draw attention to himself and the legal situation?" Well, I've been following. I think he is definitely an activist in the sense he wants to bring attention to it, and this is as much attention that has been brought to this entire legal framework. Now, there's a better part of the British population now that knows what an RRO is, and now might ask the question, why do the courts issue them? Under what context do they issue them? Is it appropriate to issue them with this frequency? And we'll see. Oh, and remind me, okay, so Robert Atkinson, thank you very much. Wasn't one of the judges newly appointed? I don't know, but it reminds me of another issue is that, before I read the decision, and before I even knew that Tommy got reconvicted or convicted of the contempt charge, there's something that I was thinking in my mind is, if the court comes back and says that the contempt was in fact not there and Tommy was wrongly convicted, you run this question now, would then Tommy get to sue the courts for wrongful imprisonment and damages, etc.? And so a lot of people can question as to whether or not there's sort of like an inherent, like the thin blue line of police officers defending police officers, whether or not there's going to be an incentive for the court to try not to grotesquely overturn the original decision, because it might open the door for damages. And it's like, is there an unwritten law amongst judges that even if you think a judge was wrong, you don't throw a judge under the bus, which would have been, what the second court might have been doing just as a matter of fact by saying, no, Tommy should never have been in prison in the first place. So there's that element to the courts not wanting to admit that they were wrong. They might say, okay, we screwed up procedurally, but substantively we didn't, so there's no harm, no foul. Like, he was going to go to jail anyhow for 9 months, not 13, and even though there was a procedural impropriety, it didn't have a substantive or practical effect because Tommy's going to jail anyhow. So there's that line of reasoning which could have given someone an indication or an inkling as to how the court might go, because they don't want to undermine themselves, so to speak. No, and okay, so anthropology bear the anxiety. The anxiety charge. They made evidence that Tommy's live stream caused anxiety to the defendants who were showing up for sentencing. I mean, I agree. I'm aware of that, but the anxiety was not the basis for finding of contempt. Anybody can say whether or not these guys would have been, whether or not any defendant is going to be anxious regardless when they show up for sentencing. It goes without saying. Whether or not that should be an aggravating factor is another issue, but that wasn't a determinant factor in terms of coming to the finding of contempt. But that's it. I mean, it's a real question. I had never. It's a learning curve for everybody as to seeing the system now and how it works, and people are going to be asking questions, and they're going to be asking good questions because this entire process raises good questions. You have to bear in mind. I mean, I've been practicing for going to be 13 years. Now, admittedly, I do civil litigation and not criminal, but I'm friends with a ton of criminal lawyers. My father's practiced for 45 years. I've never seen anybody go to jail for contempt. I've never seen anybody go to jail for contempt. I've never actually. It's virtually unheard of, and this is not like the 15th violation. We can argue over the severity of the potentially nefarious consequences of the contempt. But this was maybe a second contempt, and we can debate over the severity. But 9 months in jail for contempt. I mean, it's. I think we can agree that the sanction is unheard of. The question, or relatively unheard of. The only question is going to be whether or not you think it's appropriate, and that's again a question of opinion. But just knowing the facts and knowing the law will help everyone get there. Okay, so let's see here. Does anyone have any questions of things that I didn't get to? I'm going to go to my screenshots because I screenshot the stuff that I want to make sure I don't forget to get to it. No, everyone should read the decision, because if you haven't read the decision up until now, I think that this will help you digest what is otherwise code, incomprehensible legalese. But you can read what the court says, and it's not. Like I say, the court's decision is not untenable. And this is the thing about that all lawyers know, is when the facts in this case could have gone one way or the other. I mean, it could have just as easily, justifiably, and rationally gone one way or the other. And then the question is just, which way did the court want to go because of what they feel? And this is where you can get into the underlying, it works in politics and it works in these situations, is the underlying sentiments of the judges will govern the way they see the world and will govern the way they go when you have two equally justifiable outcomes, but you think it was contempt. Okay, well, you have the evidence there to justify a condemnation. If you are a pro-freedom of press and you think that there shouldn't be these restrictive orders, or not exactly, because this is what the court remarked on, is that nobody was trying to undermine the RRO. No one was trying to say it shouldn't have been in place because you can't do that, and under contempt is not the proper venue to do that. But if someone were to say it wasn't that bad of a breach, or what he said was all in the public domain, or he was on public property, it was without consequence, you could have gone that way. If you wanted to fine for contempt, but you didn't want to send someone to jail for 9 months, you could have said, yeah, okay, there were ultimately minimal impact. Maybe there was a risk of minimal impact, so we should, give him a sentence that's going to be a deterrent to him and a deterrent to anybody else. Okay, so that's it. Okay, so let's get to some questions. Anybody else send out some questions here? Let's see what we got. Viva Frei says, why did you shave your righteous facial hair? It's a long story. I tend to start pulling it in and then it doesn't look right, so I have to shave it and let it grow anew. But also I needed to get some tan on my face. Like I was very, very, very pale. And it's good. It's good to shake things up and not get physically attached to what you believe your image to be. Deep thoughts. Robert Atkinson asks, as a Canuck, what is your favorite Rush album? Rush is Canadian. I don't think I could name you one Rush song. Now I think I'm going to get in trouble. Okay, I'm going to get to as many questions as I can now. Deuce Go Tech LX says, do you think Tommy being attacked in jail will have any effect on the case long term? From what I understand, he's going to a civil jail and not a criminal jail, which has different conditions and people online make jokes when they hate someone that they hope bad things happen to them in jail. Even if you hate someone, you should not wish ill on them. So no comment. It won't have any impact. Jail systems are supposed to be safe in theory, but I mean, jail is jail, and you can have problems everywhere. Okay. Let me see here. Any other questions that I have missed? Put the questions in there. Christopher Lambert says, can you study under the bar in Canada? Christopher Lambert asks, can you study under the bar in Canada? Christopher, thank you. First of all, you have to explain what you mean by that question. Where's the Vlawg dog? Well, you'll notice by the background, I'm not in my house, and this house has a cat, which it would have been hilarious if the cat came in and we'd have a Vlawg cat, but no, Vlawg dog is off somewhere else causing trouble. I hope I got to everything on the Tommy Robinson. I think I did. These things they're very important legal questions. I mean, these are going to set precedents, and these are going to be legal matters that people are going to study in 10, 20 years time. We're just so fortunate in a very cynical way to be living through them with the era that we have. Is like we have the collective knowledge of the internet, and we have the collective wisdom of an entire globe. And that's sort of the beauty of the internet. That's sort of the beauty of YouTube and live streaming is you can get it's a big place for misinformation. It's a good place for clarifying information as well. Okay, hold on. Please answer Roger or his head will explode. Roger, ask the question again right now. Okay, I'm going to wait for Roger's question to come. Okay, I feel bad now. A lot of people are saying I missed Roger's question. Someone's got to put Roger's question in there. And that so Divided States of America says precedent doesn't seem to have place in modern law anymore. Well, this is the other issue, is that there's a wealth of jurisprudence out there in case law where, and if you read the decision, you'll see that everybody has there's diverging case law, and it goes to the fact that whatever you want to find, you'll be able to find case law to support it. And to the extent that it's not just like an absolutely untenable bad decision, that's it. Okay, so Roger said, if this had been in the U.S. and our First Amendment, Roger said, if this had been in the U.S. and our First Amendment, how would this have been different? Well, so I looked into it briefly, and I'm by no means the constitutional expert, even in Canada, let alone under the U.S. or in the U.K. The U.S. with the First Amendment is a cornerstone of the society. I mean, I don't think it would have happened. I don't think you get these generalized publication bans. There was a Supreme Court decision from the 70s when the New York Times was going to publish a report, and the government sought a publication ban on the basis that it would compromise. It was either war efforts or military efforts, but they said it was struck. The Supreme Court says no, it's freedom of the press, and even if divulging it makes the police look bad, even if it makes the government look bad, the freedom of the press is like an essential freedom to guarantee a free and civil society. I mean, once you start getting into the habit of gagging the press, you quickly regress and you quickly degress. What's the word? You degrade into totalitarian regimes where people can't report on what's going on. They can't have knowledge of what's going on. And it's anybody who hasn't read 1984, it's like, I mean, it's beautiful, but it's beautiful obviously because this has always been going on to some extent or another. It's just a question of the internet now being a resource that connects everybody so people can learn about it. Okay, let's see what we got. Yeah, this is Deuce saying the Americans had the OJ trial on primetime TV. I mean, this is the other thing that I'm thinking is, yeah, you segregate the jury from society. You don't segregate society from access to high-profile cases that define an era, that define a generation. Okay, Jonas Diala says, opinion on super injunctions feels like those go into very similar direction. Okay, I'm not sure what a super injunction is offhand, unless we're talking about like interjurisdictional or cross-jurisdictional injunctions. But yeah, no, look, I always say there's access to information is rarely a bad thing. And it's you know, if they start handing out RROs like candy, we're going to be into different problems. But then that's a question of knowing the law, disagreeing with the law, and voting in people who are going to either change the law or apply it fairly. It's not, you know, it takes the activists. It takes an activist to break the law so that they can get, you know, for what some people feel unfairly punished, for the law to come to national attention, for people to take issue with the law. And some people do it and other people don't. And sometimes that's how abuse comes to the forefront. Let's see what we got. Joseph Noonan says, what is your opinion about the contempt of court in general? Do you think it is archaic and needs to be abolished? Contempt of court it has a good rationale. It's this specific publication ban contempt under that section 4.2, which was new to me. But now, contempt of court, you need to have decorum in the courtroom. You need to ensure that court orders are respected. And you need to ensure that systematic, egregious violations of court orders are punished, and punished more than, you know, sometimes a monetary punishment doesn't have the deterrent effect. But imprisoning somebody for contempt, it has to be egregious and it has to be proportionate. And I could have anticipated imprisoning him, Tommy, for 48 hours or for a week, pending the resolution, and then come back and have a resentencing. But okay, so let's see. But no, you need to have contempt, because otherwise there's going to be no quasi-criminal sanction for saying, oh, that's a nice injunction, Your Honor, that you issued, but, you know, too bad, I'm not going to respect it. Let's see here what we got. Super injunction bans the press from mentioning the name of the person who took out the injunction. Okay, I'm going to have to look into it. It sounds already too complicated, and I don't have any knowledge to give a good opinion on it, or to give any sort of a breakdown. Any thoughts on this situation more generally? New Zealand jailing people for publishing. This is another issue. I mean, you know, we were born. I grew up in the era where the internet was only for, you know, bad things, where you had, like, you know, the live leaks and you had all these videos. I honestly, I don't know. That I don't know, but it's I don't know. Let's see what else we got. David, Divided States of America, read 1984 and Aldous Huxley's A Brave New World. Two good ones, although I don't know that I've read A Brave New World in any recent memory. Okay, get some more questions in before we call this. What time is it? What time did we start? Oh, it's okay. It's only been an hour and 10 minutes. It's a beautiful day. We're going to go fishing afterwards. I was kayaking in the swamp and caught a pike this morning, but okay, let's see what we got here. Okay. Viva, do the contempt findings against Mr. Robinson meet the criminal standard of beyond all reasonable doubt, as they're legally required to? Well, I mean, it depends on who you ask. If you ask the court, they said yes. I mean, that's the short answer, because that's it. I mean, contempt has to be beyond a reasonable doubt, especially when they're imprisoning someone. I mean, not especially, because it's beyond a reasonable doubt regardless. But because it risks imprisonment, it's beyond a reasonable doubt. Morton E.R. Crazy says, what other creators do you watch? You seem to be in the know. So it's interesting. Okay, I mean, this is fun. Creators that I watch for pure fun. Okay, Okay, I watch a few fishing shows. Black Tip H, I watch because I love fishing, and I'll watch anybody who's fishing. That guy who recently shot up, his channel blew up because of this video where he put the GoPro on the turtle. I've been watching him forever, and to see his channel explode like that was amazing. Not another cooking show, just because I do occasionally like actually learning how to cook. Great channel. Cody Warner, for anybody who wants the daily vlog type thing or good advice on how to vlog, is good. I mean, it's great. You know, I have some friends whose channels that I watch occasionally. I'm gonna feel bad because I'm gonna forget names. But for political stuff, I like to get from the left and the right. So I get the Amazing Lucas, I get the Young Turks. Even though I get Tim Pool, who I like because I find him to be actually among the most balanced. Let's see, political channels. I just discovered Black Pigeon Speaks because of the because of their suspension, which is the ultimate irony of the Streisand effect, and they're very interesting. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. It's like the idea that you can actually watch people and have a civil disagreement with them, and you can still watch people even if you don't agree with everything they say, and you don't have to tune them out of your life because of it. Okay, let me see if I got those are the ones I get. Divided States. Are you subscribed to PewDiePie? Of course, I'm subscribed to PewDiePie. I haven't watched him in a long time. Yeah, admittedly, I haven't watched PewDiePie in a long time. But I like the Pew News. I mean, I like the Pew News more than the other stuff because it's interesting. But I gotta say, I haven't watched him since the Tati versus James Charles saga. But only because it's the reality of doing the creation is you end up not watching as much of other creators as you would have otherwise watched. Tim Pool is balanced and to the point. He rarely takes a stand. He rarely takes a stand on an issue. He is. I mean, and Tim Pool is interesting. I'll just talk about him for a few minutes because we have time. Tim Pool is like one of those guys who says that he's left, and I generally and genuinely in this day and age am confused as to who's left and who's right, because I know very few people who adhere to any beliefs that are, just absolutely one or the other. And people ask me, like, where am I left? I have people accusing me of being a liberal Canadian. I have other accusing me of being a closet conservative. And then, but I'm thinking, like, on a personal level, I hold views which are obviously on both sides on the litmus test issues. And so Tim Pool's interesting because he says he's left, and then, a lot of time I'm listening and I say, geez, a lot of people might think he's right wing, or that he's saying he's left just to disguise it that he's actually right. But I think this what's the word that they call it? I think just this creating this false dichotomy that you're either left or you're right is only healthy for divisive politics. I think ultimately we are much more all somewhere unified down the center with issues that we consider dear that we might fundamentally disagree with others on. But okay, let's go for a few more minutes and then we're going to go fishing or swimming. Actually, just fishing. The water out here is very ridden with algae. Okay, who's got a question? Who's got questions? Viva Frei. Ma Harbles says, check out Emi Madine Japan and Man and River for cooking and Water Fun respectively. Okay, I will absolutely do that. I also watch Gordo the drummer because I love awesome drumming. Divided States of America, are you trying to get me in trouble with YouTube again? There are incendiary topics, there are incendiary issues, but Alex Jones is a name that carries with it a ton of stuff. It's also, internet discourse is not the best place for nuanced discussions, but the world is filled with all types of people. Why are you still here and not fishing? Well, the reality is it's still a little hot and it's still a little windy, and I'm going to take the kids out in the canoe, so I got to make sure to not tip and traumatize people for life. Let's see what we got here. Okay. Okay, you know what? Let's do it. We'll go for another. I like round numbers. Hey Siri, timer 2 minutes.
Okay, your timer is set for 2 minutes.
Let's do this. Black Pigeon Speaks. Who is the other one that I recently discovered? No, I think it was Black Pigeon Speaks and Tim Pool were the ones I discovered as a result of the recent bans, like the Streisand effect type thing. But they're very insightful. You don't have to agree with everybody to watch them. I don't agree with the Young Turks, but I do like to know what people are saying. Why is the Canadian government so against the media outlet Rebel Media? I've been asking myself the same question, actually. I watch Rebel Media. I watch Ezra. What's his name? Ezra Levant. I like to know what these people are saying, and I like to know what Rebel's saying. I don't find them as offensive as everybody makes them out to be, and to see the government taking Rebel Media's name onto the actual government floor. I mean, first of all, are they doing it on purpose? Do people not know what the Streisand? Everyone knows what the Streisand effect is, correct? Robert Atkinson says with another super chat, thank you very much. You like German, but you don't like Rush. I love Travis Barker. Where was I talking? Okay, for them to mention Rebel Media on the government floor, if they don't understand that creates more awareness, or as opposed to more animosity, it would confirm a certain detachment from the population at large. But it's mind blowing. And I watch Rebel Media. They have certain journalists or certain personalities that have a method of delivery that I don't adopt myself. But like, you have to be outrageously offensive or harassing in order to actually deserve being demonized like that. Okay, look what we got here. Let's see what we got. Judicial independence, it needs to be legitimized or abandoned. That is the dog barking that it is time for us to go. We'll go in a couple of minutes if we have some more questions in this. Judicial independence, that's a tricky thing, because that's not only a question of whether or not there's actual independence, that's a question of whether or not there's perceived independence, and people not getting their way, even if it's justifiably so, you can always cry judicial partiality, even when independence exists. The problem is, once the appearance of judicial impartiality is compromised, it's very difficult to get back. And I mean, it's the same thing as reputation. It takes years to build, but it takes years to build, minutes to ruin, and once it's ruined, it takes an even longer time to build. When people start questioning the legitimacy of the government and the political function and the judicial function, you have problems. I mean, then you have problems that take years to remedy. Vlogman review music on Dave 2 says Vlogman review music on live streams. Okay, maybe I can do that. Review music. Who cares what I think about music? Fun context. Your stream is now 1/4 as popular as the one I recently saw, Steve-O's. Very good. Awesome. Thank you. I love the fact that I don't know what the best time to do the live streams are to maximize, in international time zones. But this is good. I love it. And people can watch it afterwards if they miss it. Okay. Have I ever been to Circuit Gilles Villeneuve to watch Formula One? I have never been there to watch Formula One. I've been there to road bike. I've been there to drive to La Ronde, which is our amusement park. I've never seen F1 in person. I've heard it from afar. Yeah. Dave cares. Okay. Do I listen to Joe Rogan's podcast? I listen to Joe Rogan not as often as I'd like to, and there has to be like some big issue, big name, or very interesting segment to watch, because I 3 hours. I mean, I wish I could listen to 3 hours I wish I could listen to all the people I want to listen to. There's just not enough time in the day, and I have to. The vlogs that I've been shooting. It's not just the shooting and the editing that takes hours. I have to actually be comfortable with my knowledge of the subject, so that I don't embarrass myself by making a bad mistake or a big mistake. And my biggest concern about making mistakes, it's not a question of pride. It's a question of losing confidence in subscribers. And when you make a mistake online in today's day and age, it can be a bona fide good-natured, or what's the word I'm looking for? Good faith mistake. But people can think you made the mistake on purpose. People can accuse you of deliberately misleading. Once you start, those types of things are things that I want to avoid, not for a question of pride, for a question of confidence in the people who watch my vlogs. Okay, so divided States of America. Do I believe that Trump will win 2020? All that I'm amazed to see is the fighting that's going on in politics. Politics is a dirty, dirty business. It's not much different than law, and there's a reason why so many lawyers become politicians. Okay, let's do it. Would I do a live stream with Sargon of Akkad? Okay, I'm going to be embarrassed to say this. I don't know enough about Sargon of Akkad. I know I see that name come up everywhere. I don't know enough about him. I don't think I've seen many video. I mean, I don't think I've seen any standalone video, which is terrible. I'm going to go watch a few of them at least just to know who he is, because I see his name come up everywhere. I would do an opinion. I would do an interview with anybody, and I'm always brutally honest. My only concern in doing an interview is this guilt by association, or this accusation that by giving a platform to people that you even disagree with, you therefore become a legitimate object of hate and harassment. And it's a very dangerous thing, because sometimes you have to interview the people even if you disagree with them, and and it's not a question of giving them a platform or giving them a spotlight. It's so that people can know what the people they disagree with think, and so they can respond to it, so they can look into it. This whole deplatforming, this whole silencing of interviewing controversial or people that you might vehemently disagree with, I don't agree with it, but it's the reality of the world. And that's the thought process is, you have to think about that before you decide whether or not you want to interview someone. And the other problem is that sometimes you do interview people who have done things that you never knew of, that just are so objectionable that you would not have wanted to have a discussion with them had you known it. Okay, so who's Brock Turner? I saw that Talsaps. Who's Brock Turner? I'm going to Google that because I'm not familiar with that. Ride Fast Jump High 420 says, have you taken some time to learn about Bitcoin? I've looked into it. I still don't know enough about it, and I still don't understand it. I did an interview with a guy who owns a coffee shop that does Bitcoin mining, and I'm not sure if the coffee shop's still in business. It was in Montreal, and you could pay for your coffee with mined Bitcoin. And he explained it to me for half an hour, and I felt stupid because I still couldn't understand it. So there are certain subjects where I just have an actual mental block, and Bitcoin is one of them, because it seems like a fiction to me. I don't understand how it works. Yosemite Sam says, the left isn't interested in conversation, or at least not in the US. Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to get involved in a political discussion in the comment thread. Connor Kearney, Tommy should have had a jury. So again, that's a question I don't know. I've seen people ask it. And now I'm trying to think if I even know the answer under Quebec law. I've done contempt. I filed motions for contempt, and I've gotten my adversary held in contempt for egregiously violating a court order. We didn't have a jury; it was done in front of a judge. But I don't know what the rules are in the UK. This is going to be like one of those never-ending vlogs. I'm going to have to wait for either my wife or my kids to come harass me to get off. But I told them 90 minutes, so we still have time, even by the official clock. Philip 7 PC, could you vlog about the transferability of international laws concerning YouTube and digital content platforms? What is illegal in Germany might be legal in the US. YouTube. That's a complicated question, man. I mean, that's such a complicated question that I think it might have not even minimal interest, but it might be so complicated that it might tune people out. And it's something that it might be over ambitious for me to deal with. Some of the stuff is like breaking down the sort of the current stuff as opposed to like thesis stuff. That's thesis stuff. Although I hope I addressed the question of jurisdiction of the jurisdiction in the PewDiePie T series. I answered that in one of the last vlogs. Divided States of America. Do I subscribe to Judicial Watch and Tom Featon? No, I don't, but I do read. I know I see what Judicial Watch does in terms of their FOIA requests. I keep up with the news. I mean, a lot of the stuff I don't get from YouTube, but some of the stuff I do. Okay, what else? Let's see here. Is Vlogman's wife hot? Well, if you're asking me, my wife is the most beautiful woman on earth. But beauty comes from within as well. Talsaps. Okay, let's see here. Do I follow the secret barrister in the UK? No, I don't. No, I don't. I don't follow all that many people. I just try to watch videos on a subject when it comes time to watch it. Highly. Okay. People, I think we can do it. We'll call it. It's late for the UK, and it is early enough here that I can actually go and catch some fish and hopefully release them, because I don't like eating pike, but I do whenever they unfortunately cannot be released. So that is it. Good talking with you. We'll do another one sooner than later. I have 2 people on my interview list. Actually, let me just bring this back up and make sure I'm not forgetting anything. I have 2 people on my interview list. Amazing Lucas said he would come back on. So I'd love to talk with the Amazing Lucas anytime, just because he's an entertaining individual and he is not shy about his opinions. And I want to do a live stream with Cody Warner, who, for anybody who doesn't know it, Cody Warner did daily vlogs for a while, and then he did a collaboration with Peter McKinnon, who was another guy that I used to watch a lot. He's a Canadian YouTuber. But Cody Warner's an interesting character and does a lot of interesting vlogs in terms of content, creativity, and these types of things, motivation. I want to do a live stream with Cody because we've said we wanted to do a collaboration for a while, but it's tough to get an actual collab. And I would interview pretty much anybody that, you know, if I don't interview someone, it's because I have a moral issue with actually interviewing them, and you'll never know it because I just won't interview them. Arcion says, did you hear about Facebook allowing its users to threaten and dox certain people on a list? I didn't hear about that, but I always just took for granted that you can always get doxed on the internet, which is why everyone should act, even when they think they're acting anonymously, they should act as though they can get doxed at any time. I mean, I don't know what, I mean, I have to know the details, whether or not they were allowed, whether or not they were doing it without getting punished internally, whether or not it was a policy. But I mean, the way things work in the digital world, it wouldn't surprise me. It would disappoint me, but it would not surprise me. Talsaps says, I would have sent you donations, but YouTube doesn't let me for some reason. Don't worry about it. I'm very thankful for the super chats. I'm very thankful for the support, the sharing, and anybody getting a shirt. I think we sold 21 shirts, which is like, I still haven't gotten mine, incidentally. I ordered 3 shirts. They still haven't come yet. But no, I'd say I would not be surprised. I would be disappointed, but not surprised. But I think if we all just online behaved as though we could get doxed, which we can at any time by people who are tech savvy, we would probably not say the things that people have the tendency of saying reflexively just because they think it's the digital world where people don't have real feelings. But it's funny how doxing is extremely difficult to persecute and punish, but we basically have an internet where everyone, okay, yeah, I mean, it's, okay, yeah, I have to, some of the inflammatory rhetoric I try not to read because there are legitimate points, but then they may be made in inflammatory ways. But yeah, the doxing on the internet, I mean, it's terrible. I mean, people should be able to speak freely without the threat of being doxed. And people are often doxed, you know, not for doing bad things, but for saying things that other people disagree with, and then you just, you know, people unleash the harassment, which people somehow think doesn't count. Talk about the painting behind me, Kez. I have no idea what that is. I'm in someone else's house right now, using their internet because it works better. Mandatory carry, you made it. Mandatory, thank you very much. You willing to advise on a civil matter about inspired by real event movies that aren't? Would I be willing to advise on a civil matter about inspired by real events movies that aren't? So mandatory carry. First of all, and this is a comment for everybody. I never give specific advice, and I can't, and I legally won't, and I liability won't. I get a lot of emails of people asking me like for advice in specific cases. I can't, and I don't, and I won't. And beware of any lawyer that would, because you can't give advice on imperfect information. You can't give advice on what people should do in other jurisdictions because things just matter. Now, you know, we could break down cases and we can break down scenes and I can give you my anecdotal evidence, you know, my anecdotal feedback, but I can't ever give anything that could be construed as advice or respond to specific questions, because if I don't know what the prescription period is in another state and I give bad advice, I mean, you know, this is how people get in trouble. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so we got Sian Egan says, what about opinion based on your own experience? No, I can give experience. I can give opinion based on my own experience, but the risk is that because I do get, you know, as a lawyer, you get cold calls. People say, I need your opinion on something. It's a quick question. First of all, it's never a quick question. You cannot give it an opinion unless you know all the facts and the law, and you have to look into it. And it's reckless from a liability perspective. But people also don't appreciate that I just can't give advice because of interjurisdictional issues. I can't give advice on California law. I can't give advice on Washington law. Can't give advice on on UK law. I can analyze things and sort of give we can break them down, but it's not. I'm not giving legal advice that someone's going to act on and potentially get themselves in trouble. Okay. Let's see what else we got. That's true. Okay, good. Hey, Viva. Oh, we've got 0 Hour TV 256. Hey, Viva. Sorry, I'm late. What are we talking about? Oh, 0 Hour. Well, I can't do that. This is an hour and a half. 0 Hour is another one of the channels. I've been following on Instagram because he's been putting up like 1-minute updates every day of his road to health, and it's going to be amazing to watch when he puts together the 1-year montage and we see the transformation. But good on Zero. Keep at it. It's a process. Talsap says, did you miss my message on explaining who Brock Turner is? I may have missed it, Talsap, but don't worry, I'm going to Google it afterwards. I'm going to look into it more thoroughly. Okay. We're going to end it out. Now we're really going to end it, people. Thank you very much for coming. Enjoy the weekend. Enjoy the day. And peace out. I'm going to put my thumb over this and end the broadcast now.